First, before we begin, I just want to say a big thank you for getting me to 200 subscribers. I really appreciate the support that this channel is getting and hope to get. Please, keep tuning in for more of my content that you love. Thank you, and enjoy today's video. The first opinion is low-key old news, but it is something that I have been wanting to share my opinion on. So, it's been about 2 months since the Woojin scandal, and honestly speaking, the whole thing was a mess. Watching fans who claim to be real Stray Kids fans basically look like complete clowns on the internet was semi-amusing, but also embarrassing as a stay. I am not going to go into detail about the Woojin issue, because 1, it's old news, and 2, there are other videos made by others who probably explained it better than I could. Just know that in short, Woojin was found to be innocent. Honestly speaking, despite the allegations being false, and the bullying part still not proven to be true, I realized that fans took that moment to basically unleash their own personal dislike for Woojin. The amount of hate videos, and videos being created, claiming to have proof of Woojin being mean to his members, is hilarious. And to see people turn it as if he had always been this way, yet saying, "How could I have not noticed," is also hilarious. Let me just say, the reason you didn't notice the first time, is because it was never there to begin with. But now that you have hopped on the Woojin hate train, and are now picturing him as an evil person, you went out of your way to look for supposed moments of him being rude and mean to his members, to further feed your dislike for him. I will be honest, when Stray Kids first debuted, in fact, even before their debut, Woojin was always the member I forgot, and was never really interested in. But that wasn't because I hated him, or even disliked him. I was more or less indifferent with him. He didn't really interest me as much as the other members did, and he always seemed kind of dull compared to the others. But again, that wasn't because I didn't like him. I guess you could say, I couldn't connect to him like I did with the others. For instance, when I say connection, I mean something that connected me to the members, such as similarities between me and the members that we share. For instance, Woojin didn't speak English like Chan, Felix, or Songmin, and he didn't share a similar personality as me, like Jisung and Changbin do. He wasn't the same age as me, like Minho is, and he wasn't into the same things I was, like Hanjin was. Plus, I didn't find him adorable like I did with Ian. There was nothing that I could connect Woojin to myself with, therefore making it easy for me to forget about him, which I definitely feel bad doing. But that is what we as fans do. We either find things we admire about a group or a member, or find something that they do similar to us, making us feel more connected to them, and I just didn't have that with Woojin. Despite all of this, it doesn't mean I am going to go after Woojin for allegedly bullying his ex-members. Especially when the only proof Stays seem to have, is videos of him looking uninterested or minding his own business. Which last I checked, everyone is allowed to feel that way, and everyone is allowed to not get along with everybody. It doesn't mean that they are now bullies. Anyways, what I am trying to say, is that we all knew that those allegations were most likely false. But we still kept creating those videos, because deep down, it was us who never really liked Woojin to begin with. We needed a reason to throw hate at him. And by us, I mean you. I myself, was just not interested in the guy. I mean, despite him having the most lines in their songs, and being their best vocalist, and an okay dancer, he still had the least fans, the least fan cams, the least appreciation videos, and the least ships. Making him the easiest and fastest for Stays to turn on him. All I am saying, is that the bandwagon hate Woojin got, was done by those who secretly didn't like him to begin with, not by those who wanted justice for the alleged victim or victims. So, as we know, SM is planning on expanding NCT, by not just adding new members, but also debuting them and stretching them out into new countries and continents. Places such as Japan, Southeast Asia, America, Europe, Australia, and wait for it, Africa. Well, honestly speaking, this idea is not a bad idea, it really isn't. Because it shows how much dedication and determination SM has, into wanting to connect to fans all over the world, and having each NCT unit represent a country or a continent helps him get that. However, SM still has some issues they need to fix before moving forward with such a huge expansion. Like for one, despite this being a good idea, SM still lacks the capacity to provide a quality and good representation when it comes to the units. For instance, when it comes to equality, I have noticed that not all the members get a lot of promotion, screen time, and honestly, love and attention from both the fandom and SM, easily being forgotten or put aside. Whether you want to believe it or not, SM does have a favorite, and it is indeed Mark. As for Taehyung, I wouldn't necessarily say he is a favorite per se. I mean, the only reason it seems like he is being placed in every unit but NCT Dream and WayV is because he is the leader. Taehyung is the ultimate leader of NCT, so it only makes sense for SM to place him in other units as well. And if SM could, they would have placed both him and Mark in WayV also, but because of the whole China versus South Korea thing, they really can't, hence why there isn't any Korean members in WayV. However, it is clear as day that Mark is SM's favorite, which in itself comes with its pros and cons. From gaining a lot of attention and support, to being overworked and overscheduled. However, with SM putting all of their attention on very few members, it leaves the other members getting easily pushed aside and forgotten. Now, when it comes to lack of good promotion, it is clear that SM tends to put people in units that have no business being in certain units to begin with. SM also tends to misplace members, or forget to add them in a unit that they should be in. For instance, despite 10 being one of the OG NCT members, one of the first NCT members to debuting in NCTU, with the song 7th Sense in 2016. SM didn't place him in an official unit until 2019, the year WayV debuted, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. Secondly, when Kun, Jungwoo, and Lucas debuted back in 2018, only Jungwoo and Lucas really truly had an official debut, when they debuted in NCTU, with the song Boss. And yes, I know Kun debuted with NCTU back in 2016, with the song Without You, the Chinese version, but that technically doesn't count, cause only his voice debuted, not him per se. I can't stop thinking about the time NCT were invited on Weekly Idol, and when they were playing the random play dance game, Kun was the only one who didn't participate until Black on Black came on at the very end, and even then, he doesn't even have any lines on the song, and he is placed at the very back of the performance. I just keep asking myself, why did SM debut him in the first place? Why didn't they just wait until they debuted WayV to introduce him then? Because that part on Weekly Idol was just plain sad to look at. Thirdly, even though Super M is not part of NCT, and is not an NCT unit, it is however SM's second crossover unit that they have had, ever since U-Unique, which involved them incorporating members from each of the groups that they had at the time. However, despite Super M being an American-focused K-pop group, SM failed to include their only actual American artist into the group, which is Johnny. For a company preaching representation and connection all over the world and incorporating people that represent each country or continent that they are trying to reach, they sure missed the mark on not putting Johnny in Super M. Honest to God, I love Lucas, he is dorky and adorable in his own Lucas way, but let's not pretend that Johnny wouldn't have been a better choice than him, artistic and musical-wise. Lucas barely gets any lines in Super M, and he is legitimately becoming the win-win of Super M. The only thing Lucas has going for him in comparison to Johnny is popularity. Lucas has more fans, and despite WayV being a Chinese-based group, he gets a lot of offers to be on Korean variety shows in comparison to Johnny. However, Johnny can sing better, rap better, dance better, play multiple instruments, and is basically an entertainment genius in NCT. Not to mention, he speaks fluent English, and can easily help Mark answer interview questions. And before you come in the comment section saying, 10 is fluent also, you're right, 10 is fluent. He is when speaking with simple words, and having basic conversations, but when it comes to complex questions in interviews or even big words, you see him struggling and eventually throwing the question at Mark to answer for him, which the other members of Super M do as well, and have openly admitted to when they appeared on Knowing Brother. With Johnny, Mark can at least have someone he can rely on to help him with the questions when he himself gets stuck. Just like the other Super M members rely on Mark, if Johnny were added, both Mark and Johnny could rely on each other. However, marketing-wise, I do very much understand why Lucas was added, but realistically it should have been Johnny. Now, when it comes to SM expanding into different countries, I think my only issue is that they are probably going to add Taehyung and Mark into those units, most definitely Mark. And honestly speaking it makes sense, because like I said, Taehyung is the leader, and Mark is more or less an all-rounder, who speaks a universal language fluently, which is English. My only issue with that is they will be more overworked, so I do hope that SM will instead add more members who speaks the language in which they are trying to represent and promote in. For instance, if they are planning on debuting a unit in Japan, I better see Yuta, and Shotaro, and more Japanese members than Korean, in that unit. If they are planning on debuting a unit in Australia, they better bring their own version of a Felix, or a Bang Chan into that unit. And if they are planning on debuting a unit in Africa, my motherland, I better see someone who looks like me or at least looks like the model Han Min at the very least. I don't think that is too much to ask. Okay, this one is kind of random and short. But I can't be the only one who cringes when they hear other K-pop fans call themselves stans, despite knowing fully well what a stan is. If you don't, I will insert a link to Eminem's music video, because he was more or less the person who created that term to begin with. But in short, a stan is basically the Korean version of a sasaeng. Those who go over and beyond to meet their idols, to the point of invading their personal space, personal lives, and basically making their idols uncomfortable for the sake of love. So, when I see regular fans call themselves stans, I low-key cringe. However, I will admit that I have used that term to describe myself, when trying to address myself as a big fan of a certain group. But after looking into more detail and doing more research, I think I am better off just calling myself a fan, and for those who know better, you are too. I am not the biggest girl group fan, and more specifically, not a SM girl group fan. I have tried becoming a fan of Girls' Generation, it didn't last. I still like some of their songs and some of the members, but I just couldn't do it. I tried FX, and although I liked them more than SNSD, it just didn't stick either. As for Red Velvet, their first impression didn't come off that great, especially with the whole Irene hates men, and Wendy's stereotypical impression of black people and white people. Not to mention, the only member from Red Velvet that I truly seem to like is Seulgi, and for me, I see no point being a fan of a group if I only like one member. In addition, the only girl group that I can honestly say that I am truly a fan of is Everglow. There are a few other girl groups that I indulge in every once in a while, like Blackpink, Twice, G-Friend, Weeki Miki, IZ*ONE, and ITZY. But in terms of actually being fans of them, only Everglow has had that effect on me. For instance, their music appeals to me more, especially their B-side tracks, and I like the relationship they have with each other more. However, with the debut of aespa, I feel like that might change. They might become the second girl group that I fully become a fan of. Even though my first impression of them wasn't that great, due to the Karina controversy thing, I did decide to give them the benefit of the doubt. Which has resulted in me liking their debut song, Black Mamba, and the choreography for the song. The AI concept isn't bad either, as long as SM moves it towards the right direction like KDA. And I already seem to have found myself a bias in the group too, which seems to be Winter. And coincidentally enough we both share the same ultimate K-pop bias, Buseong Kwan. So far, they seem good to me, I just really hope that SM does right by them. Also, despite me not liking Red Velvet all that much, I do hope that with SM pushing aespa, and aespa being their main focus for their girl groups at the moment, it won't result in them forgetting or neglecting Red Velvet, like they did with FX, when they debuted Red Velvet. As we all know, Produce 101, the Korean one, was manipulated, and we have now been made aware that there were contestants from each season, except for the first season, that were forcibly dropped or manipulated into not making it into the final lineup. To be honest, who is actually shocked by this outcome? Like whom was genuinely shocked by the fact that Produce 101 was manipulated? If you were, I am truly sorry, and I'll pray for you. But the manipulation in Produce 101 was as clear as day. It was kind of hard to miss, along with the evil editing and favoritism. With that being said, I actually only really watched the second season, the season that created 101, and the others I kind of just watched short clips of them on YouTube, but that was more than enough for me to know how evil Ment was. After noticing that New East JR, and Baekho, and Samuel didn't make the final lineup, I already had my suspicion that it was rigged. Although I understood why Samuel didn't make it, just South Korea showing their xenophobic self, however, JR and Baekho not making it was genuinely shocking to me. Like the whole season Ment was pushing JR as the national leader, due to the leader qualities he was showing throughout the whole season, and it was clear as day, that Baekho had the best vocals out of everybody in that whole season, but somehow both of them completely dropped in ranking and eventually didn't make it, like really Ment. What Ment did was absolutely disgusting, trash behavior from a snake. Those are the only words I can think of when thinking about Ment. The only reason I can think for why they didn't add JR, and Baekho, especially Baekho, is because they didn't want to add too many members of New East into the group, and because Baekho didn't really fit the image Ment had for their groups, and for 101. If you look at 101's image and the clothes their stylists put them in, even X1, you notice that they were supposed to give up a Prince-like vibe. I mean, they are the national boy group after all. But Baekho is a very muscular and is very manly in the way he acts in his image, a whole 180 from what Ment had in mind for 101. However, if this isn't the case, then I honestly can't figure out what other reason they could have not adding Baekho. As for JR, even though he wasn't listed as one of the people who got forcibly kicked out, it is made clear that Ment used his attraction with his good leadership skills to gain clout, and then when it came down to it, they turned their backs on him. Like, how are you going to hype up someone so much, almost establishing them as a potential leader for your upcoming group, only to not end up debuting them in the group in the end? That is just complete trash and snake behavior. When I heard 101 won't be performing at the 2020 Mama Award show, honestly, I was kind of a little happy. For one, the last thing we need is a group formed by Ment out of manipulation voting to be performing at an awards show for everyone to see. It will rub people the wrong way. Secondly, if there is any Produce 101 group reunion that should be happening, it should be IOI. They are the only group proven to have been legit, and they are the original Produce 101 group that started off the franchise to begin with. However, I also feel like X1 should also be given a chance to have the stage, because they were the only group who didn't even get a chance to really start anything to begin with. As soon as the scandals broke out of voting manipulation, they were quickly disbanded, so for the sake of X1 fans, and honestly for good closure I guess, X1 should be another Produce group that should get the stage. However, since Ment wasn't able to get 101 to perform, they decided to get their good old neighbor Produce 101, Japan's group, JO1 to perform instead. Part of me, as a Jam, which is JO1's fandom name, is very excited for this. Because JO1 will officially be the fourth Japanese group to be performing at a Korean awards show, the other groups being Generations from Exile Tribe, The Rampage from Exile Tribe, and AKB48, so, I am very much excited. Not to mention, JO1 will get more exposure, and it will hopefully help grow their fan base. However, I feel like Ment is only using JO1 because they are the only Produce group they can get their hands on. More or less, what I am trying to say is that JO1 isn't their first choice or even second choice. Due to the whole China versus South Korea thing, they probably couldn't get any Chinese Produce 101 groups, so their plan C was to get JO1. Anyways, I am going to take to whatever I can get, and enjoy their performance to the fullest. Well, this brings me to the end of this opinions video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. And if you have your own opinions you would like to share, please come kindly and respectfully, down in the comments section below.